In the lesson Using Count Traces, we covered some general information about trace measurements and then focused on the ways that you can use count traces. If you haven't watched that lesson, be sure to check it out so you understand the foundation material for measurements. Now we'll turn to length traces. After viewing this lesson, you'll know how to take linear measurements using length traces, and you'll be able to use special tools such as 2-point and 1-point lines. A length trace lets me calculate the distance between successive points. I'm looking at the first floor plan, and I'll zoom in so I can start to measure some of the walls for finishes, paint, wallpaper, and so on. Just as with count traces, I can initiate a length trace either by double-clicking it in the trace list or clicking the length button. Now, as a reminder, these four values are the CLAP measurements: count, length, area, and perimeter. I'm going to work from the trace list, but let's take a screenshot of the length button tooltip so we can keep it handy. Once I initiate the trace, my cursor shows the yellow ruler, indicating that I'm about to start a new measurement. As soon as I click a point, the ruler changes to indicate that I'm in the process of taking this measurement. As with count measurements, the length accumulates in the quantity list as well as in the measurement summary. Remember, the quantity list shows values for the measurement in progress or currently selected. The measurement summary shows the list of all completed and in-progress measurements for this drawing. As I click additional points, the blue line is superimposed on the drawing to clearly show which walls I've taken off. The line's color and thickness can be set, and you'll see how to do that in the lessons on configuring traces. I've finished measuring the workroom walls, so what should I do next? I have a couple of options. If I want to take off all of the walls in this general area of the plan for one summarized measurement, I can do that, and you'll see how to do this in a moment. Instead, let's say that I want a detailed list of wall lengths for each of the rooms. The tooltip tells me that I can press N to finish the current measurement and start a new one with the same trace I just used. So I'll press N. This clears the values in the quantity list, and my cursor is back to the yellow ruler, telling me that I'm starting a new length measurement. I also see the new trace in the measurement summary. Now, I mentioned that I could take off several rooms in one summarized trace. A moment ago, I started this trace by pressing N. That gave me a whole new measurement. This time, I'd like to include a few more rooms with the same trace, starting with the general manager's office. But if I just keep clicking, I get this diagonal line, which will mess up my quantities. Instead, I want to start a new group of points. The tooltip tells me that I can do that by pressing G for group. This is the same action as if I were to press the disconnected points button. It creates a new group within my same measurement. Now notice what happens in the quantity list. A separate group row shows me the total for my new group. The top row shows the total for this entire trace, adding the amounts to the room that I just finished. The measurement summary shows only the total for this measurement. Now I'm taking off plan components that are composed of horizontal and vertical lines. So how can I make my clicks as accurate as possible? Dimension has several tricks for this, and we'll cover them throughout these videos. One option is called polar mode, which forces my points to fall exactly horizontally or vertically related to the last point I click. I can engage polar mode by clicking the button in the toolbar, but also notice the tooltip, telling me that I can press and hold the control key while taking a measurement to engage polar mode as I click. If I release the control key, it returns me to freehand mode. As I engage polar mode, notice that my cursor jumps to different angles. We'll talk more about these angles at the end of this lesson. Great, so I finished the general manager's office. Let's say I want to keep going with this trace. So instead of pressing N to end the trace and start a new measurement, I'll again press G for a new group of disconnected points. This sets my group length back to 0. The total length still shows the sum for the office and general manager's rooms. Now I'm starting a new group to be added to those. As I continue adding disconnected groups to this measurement, I'll only see the last group total in the quantity list. That's why this method is appropriate for summarized measurements. It doesn't retain the quantities for the individual groups. This time, I'll turn on polar mode by clicking the button. The hint window opens, but I can always clear the display checkbox if I don't want to see it again. At this point, I'm ready for a break. To end a measurement without starting a new one, I simply double-click the last point. So I have two different measurements on this page now. The first one shows only the workroom. The second one combines the two offices and the video server room. Remember, to finish a measurement and start a new one, I press N for new measurement. To continue adding a disconnected group of points to the same measurement, I press G for group, or I can click the disconnected point button. Adding disconnected groups of points to a measurement is useful, and Dimension offers a couple of special cases for disconnected points. The first of these is 2-point lines. The framing plans are a good way to see how 2-point lines work. The floor joists are shown as parallel lines, not connected to one another. I'll start my length trace and then click 2-point line. Notice the tooltip, which reminds me that the shortcut for 2-point lines is the number 2. My cursor has changed to match the symbol on the 2-point line button, so I can keep track of which mode I'm in. In this mode, I click twice to create the first line, and then I don't need to press the G key because my next 2 points will automatically be disconnected from the first 2. Now, whether you measure the line as it's represented in the drawing or you complete the line to the edge of the wall, the principle here is the same. 2-point line mode also differs from using the G key in that the quantities don't accumulate in the group length measurement. They're simply added to the primary total for this measurement. Now I'll mention one other trick here that can help with accuracy, and this works with all types of measurement modes, not just 2-point lines. I can press the H key to activate crosshairs to display vertical and horizontal lines extending from the cursor. In a moment, we'll look at the user preferences settings related to crosshairs as well as related to polar mode. The second special case of disconnected points is one-point line mode. This mode works especially well with electrical drawings. Electrical wiring can be represented as multiple wires originating from a single point. I've set up a wiring trace so we can look at how one-point line works. I'll click one-point line. Now notice that my cursor changes yet again to the symbol matching the one-point line button. First I'll click the center point where the wires meet, and then I'll click the endpoints of each of the connected wires. In this mode, each line originates with that first center point, not with the last point I clicked. By the way, notice that my takeoff lines are curved to match how the wiring is represented. That's a setting on the standard trace. I'll show you how to find it in the lesson Configuring Traces. One final note. You've seen that whenever I add a measurement to a drawing, It appears in bold in the drawing list. I can click the Show Hide button to shrink this list to only those drawings shown in bold. This can be handy when your list gets too long. To return to the full list, I just click the button again. Let's take a look at the User Preferences settings for how Polar Mode and crosshairs work. I'll go to Settings, User Preferences, and click the Drawing tab. The Polar Mode snap angles let you control which angles your cursor snaps to when you're taking a measurement. I'm going to clear all except for the 45-degree option so you can see the difference. The crosshair display options control the appearance of the crosshairs. You can select this checkbox to always display crosshairs, and you could continue to use the shortcut H to turn them on and off as needed. So let's take a look at the changes that we just made. My crosshairs now show the color that I just set. And in Polar Mode, lines snap only to 45 degrees in addition to 0 and 90. Play with the User Preferences settings to see what works best for you. This lesson showed you how to use a length trace to take off continuous lines, disconnected groups of lines, 2-point lines, and 1-point lines. Now that you've finished this lesson, take some time to practice creating length traces by following the steps in the handout. Thanks for viewing this Anytime Learning video.